Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon, wherever you may be. Welcome to today's webinar. Today we are talking about dLive, and we're talking about dLive in an application that we haven't talked about for a little while, which is live music. We're going to enjoy an interview. We had the pleasure of talking to Dave McDonald, who's a very experienced, esteemed engineer who's worked with the likes of Adele, Sigor Ros, Portishead, Florence the Machine, to name a few. And he shared some of his insights into how he works with dLive, but also how he came to dLive because he was an iLive user for a long time before that. So we're going to share his interview. And then after that, we'll talk a little bit about the things we discussed together. And then, as I mentioned, we will take any of your questions and do our best to answer any of those. So without further ado, I will open up that video, moment of truth, and hopefully this all works. Please let us know if there are any hitches. So, hi David, thanks for joining us today for this interview. Would you like to introduce yourself, tell us a little about your background, where you come from, and what you're up to?
Hi everybody. My name's Dave McDonald. I've been a front house engineer and studio engineer for the last 35 years. My God, that seems like forever. Basically, my background started from reggae bands in the early 80s, right through to indie, right through to pop, and everything in between. Yeah, and it's just been, it was a hobby that started off into a career, basically. And now I've just been, like everybody else, just on standby. I was ready to go back out to the USA to tour for the last year. And that's been put on hold, and it's given me the perfect opportunity to speak to you.
Great, well, thank you very much. So obviously over a career spanning plus 30 plus years, you've worked on, I imagine, all styles of music, all size of tours, and pretty much everywhere across the globe.
That's correct, absolutely. And you know, there's no actual favorite, from the smallest venue to the largest venue to you know, someone's bedroom. You know, it's all music, and it's all passion, you know.
Sure. Okay. And so over that career, you've had, I imagine, a wealth of experience of every type of console, from analog to digital to everything in between, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, I cut my teeth on analogs. Some of the really early appalling models. I was actually looking at one the other day, which was a Canary 10x2, which I can remember spending some time on and looking at it today, thinking, how the hell did that actually work? But it did, and it produced something. Yeah, right through to our digital days that we're in.
Sure, absolutely. Do you still get, let's say in normal times, do you still come across analog consoles at all once in a while, or is it pretty much?
Yeah. I mean, my last experience with it was about a year and a half ago, where I was called in to do a front of house mix for somebody. So I didn't have my normal console with me, and I arrived and they wheeled out a console out of their truck, which I didn't particularly like, but the venue I was working in had an old Heritage.
Okay.
And I said, let's plug that mother in, you know, and
Sure.
I was so happy, you know, so happy.
Yeah, sometimes it's nice to get back to basics and figure out how to only use 8 compressors.
Yeah, well, you know, I've never been a man of having as much as possible. I just find that it takes you away from the goal, you know, which is for it to sound great.
Sure, absolutely. And so you, previously to your current kind of preferred mixer, you were using iLive for quite a long time over multiple projects.
Yeah.
How was your experience of iLive over that kind of span of time?
Well, it was quite an eye. I mean, there's a bit of a story to it, which I'll quickly ramble through, which is when one of your colleagues, Leon, got in contact with me. This is many years ago. I was on PM5Ds at the time. That was my first sort of initial sort of day-to-day digital console, and it was almost like I was being pestered to a degree, but not being pestered, but you know, try this, and I was working with Florence the Machine at the time, and we had a day where we were going into, I think it was Bristol, which is my hometown, and Leon turned up with this iLive, which reminded me of something from sort of Soviet technology from the 1970s mixed with the future. You know, has such a distinct look to it. You know, and we got on like a house on fire, and I did the gig, and I was just blown away. It just had all the toys that I was struggling with. You know, all the sort of you know, effects and all those sort of things that I really needed for that kind of show, which I would always struggle with the sort of Yamaha model. Even though they're good boards, they're not, for me, they haven't got that flow and that user kind of friendliness at that period of time. So you know, I instantly said that's it. I fell in love with it. I you know, it was literally had to be snatched out of my hands for the next how many other years until the dLive came onto the market. You know,
Sure.
And that's basically the story of that. You know.
Yeah, and so that's so during that period of time. Obviously, that was your console of choice whenever and wherever you could.
God, it was you know, it wouldn't leave my side. It was like my little baby. I mean, you know, people in the crew used to like, you know, take the mick out of me because it literally was by my side the whole time. And the beauty of it was it never went wrong for me. And I mean, that was one of the problems back then, was I was using, you'd use other consoles and they would, oh, this would break, or that wouldn't work, or, you know, you'd have to phone up bloody, you know, some sort of helpline. And, you know, I'm not that kind of guy. I just want it to work. You know, I'm not over technical. I just work, mix, thank you. You know,
Sure.
This thing every day just switched on, delivered, you know. So I was a fan.
Great. And so I'm sure you were quite eager, what is it, about 4 or 5 years ago now, when dLive started appearing to get your hands on that and have a
Oh yeah, I mean, you know, it was like, you know, it was like you'd built the engine, you know, and you knew what the performance was. It was like, now we're going to build the chassis and put it all together, you know, and really make this a beast.
Sure.
And that's what the dLive is it's a beast. I mean, you know, it's got the same feel as I have with the iLive, the reliability, and then just all the effects and all the processing I've got. It's like it's on steroids, you know, and it's got that flow. It's got that same feel to me.
So we still have quite a lot of iLive users, thankfully, that are very happy with their iLive, but that are curious, that are interested in evolving. How was in terms of workflow and understanding a new concept, how was the transition between iLive and dLive for you? Was it a big step, or?
It was a step. You know, I can't lie, but it wasn't a huge step, because you had a lot of similarities. You know, it was more or less designed in the same sort of thought chain. So the similarities are there. So what you need is a very basic day, basically, just running through, and then you adapt very easily.
Sure.
It's always been one of my problems is adapting to a new board is not really my forte. You know, I don't hold information. You know, it's more muscle memory with me. And I found that very easy, the transition. So yeah, it's you know, it's like I said, it's the same board, but you know, gone a step further.
I've watched some videos and read some articles and stuff, and I see that quite a recurrent term that you use is, or you talk a lot about your fondness and of analog mixing consoles. I guess that relates both to workflow, but also to the audio side of things, how things sound. At what point did you click to say the modern digital platforms really, you know, I'm not losing out, I've got everything that I want, both in terms of workflow and audio quality?
Well, I mean, I think the test, the proof in the pudding is that now I use a dLive. I don't use any outboard whatsoever. There's nothing else apart from 2 Edisons or 2 whatever just plugged in, and that's it. You know, I don't need anything else. Whereas when I was, the analog days, like you said, 8 compressors, blah, blah, stacks and stacks and stacks and stacks. When I was on some of the early digital consoles, I'd have to have, support from extra things that I would have to plumb in and all kinds of stuff. So that's the proof. That's, that to me was all of a sudden, right, well, you got it right.
Sure.
Here we go. And also the way that, because in the early days mixing reggae bands and stuff like that, that's, it's like doing live dub mixes. So it's very, very fast, it's labor intensive and very, very fast. You've got to be all over that board very, very, very quickly, throwing things around, changing parametric EQs on the reverb when it's hit the snare, so you're getting different tones each strike and all kinds of mad stuff,
Sure.
On a lot of the boards I can do that. On this I can. So that's right. It's just a natural progression. It's like I've taken off my sort of child shoes and I've got adult shoes on.
Okay, and so I guess when you talk about on earlier digital platforms having to use outboard to get where you needed to be, I suppose you're typically referring to what engineers like to talk about is warmth, warming things up. And so typically we're talking about tube, outboard, and that sort of stuff.
Tube tape and early transistor, yeah.
Sure. And that brings us neatly onto a topic, which is the tube preamp emulation that we have on board dLive. Do you make a lot of use of that? What sort of things do you...
I do. One of the things that one of the bands I've been working with recently is a New Zealand American band called Unknown Mortal Orchestra. Fantastic guitarist, and I ran along his guitars in stereo, and I used the tube stage on the both amps, one left, one right.
Okay.
One with warmth, one with crunch, and they just create this fantastic mirror image. It works perfectly for me. Also, one of the other things that I found is the on the tube staging is you can have it trebly, and I use it for the so you have a sort of trebly saturation. I use it for under snare sounds.
Okay.
Which gives me a really nice crack in the snare. It's a handy tool, and it's you hear it and you think, God, man, I could use that on backing vocals to give it that old feel. It's a great tool. You have to sit down and really work it out, but it's a great tool, And the sort of, I had to do a little bit of looking into the pentode and triode. What is pentode and triode and all these sort of things, and it starts to kind of make sense,
Yeah, of course. It's one of those things where you do need to do a bit of reading up, because in the I hate to say the olden days, but yesteryear you didn't think it was a triode preamp or a pentode preamp. You said, I like that brand because it sounds nice on this, or this brand.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And of course the beauty is having a tube preamp on every single channel. Not that you should, but if you want to,
yes,
you can.
Yes, yeah.
Cool. And then on dLive we've got the Dynate multiband compressor. Do you use that as well a fair bit?
No, I don't actually.
Okay, that's fine.
No, I'm not. I'm not a fan of multiband compressors. For me, a lot of people overuse compression, and I'm not a huge sort of, I need to just compress this one little area and let all this, I listen to old records in the way that old records used to be done, and sort of, I have an optronic on the vocal, doing what the LA2 or the optronic, as you guys call it, was meant to do, and let everything else breathe. And then the best compressors on the market are these, and that's the way I do it.
Cool.
A lot of my friends use the multiband and they love it. They swear by it, and I see them doing it, but it's not my game. Maybe I'm a bit old.
No, that's fine. You use different tools for different people, and then the crucial point is to get where you need to go, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Sure.
Absolutely.
And so you mentioned the optronic. Your favorite compressor to use?
Well, yes, it is. It is absolutely. I mean, I know the. Whenever I used to do studio work, we always used to go for the LA2 and we used to use it when it was laying down to tape, and then use it when it was coming back out on tape. It's so musical, musically natural, and the Optronic is bang on the money, you know, really is. Same with the DSs that you have are really, I really love those things, you know, they're really on it. So
Yeah, no, I appreciate that about the Optronic. I used to assist in a studio, again, very long time ago, and we had a pair, and you could see every external engineer when they walked into the studio, when they saw the pair in the rack, they just, a sigh of relief, it's going to be all right.
it's virtually every record, isn't it? From, you know, from when they were done to you know, the present day.
Sure.
You know.
Yeah, and then maybe a very subjective question. Is there a tool or a workflow on dLive that you really enjoy, that gets you where you need to go, that you wouldn't find anywhere else? Something that you just can't live without? What's your favorite workflow, or even maybe a technical aspect of dLive that you really love?
Oh, my favorite, yeah, okay. My favorite is, because I use a lot of delay, and it's basically your space echo feature, but then having the dual screens, being able to have the space echo actually on the screen, so I'm actually seeing it as a physical thing, with all the controls assigned to the controls on the space echo next to it. So you can do your feedback rates, you can change your speeds, you can change everything while looking at it, while having information on the other screen. For me, that is how it's meant to be.
Sure. So you're not locked into one function at a time.
No.
Yeah,
you know, and it's, I don't know. I mean, I haven't used many consoles recently, apart from dLives now. But for me, that was like, that's how it's meant to be. You know?
Yeah. And so, yeah, with dLive, using the widgets, using the custom rotaries, obviously it's something that really allows you to work flexibly that way.
Yeah, well, it opens up, and it makes it much more like how the analog flow of your mind and the analog flow of a board works, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And so, do you do any parallel compression? Do you do advanced processing in that way?
No.
No, no, it's a very, very strong answer. So you're very organic, using the analog workflow.
Yeah, it's all about, you know, in the sort of the German thought, man and machine together. You know, the machine is complementing the man is complementing the machine.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's the way, you know, it's giving to me and I'm giving back to it. So no, I don't use any of those sort of aspects.
Advanced routing, advanced processing, very simple,
Yeah.
really an analog workflow, so to speak.
Yeah. So I try, you know, and you know, I don't sort of say that this is the way it must be done, because it's mixing, and that's the beauty of it. Everyone has their own way of doing it, and for me, that's the way I like it. You know, it's you know, I see these old guys who used to like mix stuff, and I just think, you know, they were on this, they were running in real time. You know.
Yeah.
And I like that.
Yeah. No per song scene. No.
There is, you know, there are one act. You know, I have gone down that alleyway, and I saw the beauty of it, and I did like it, but there was also some very, very funny things where you know, I recalled the next scene, and maybe the next scene was an instrumental, and you're trying to read if the band are going to suddenly have a conversation on stage with the audience, you know, and you've just recalled the next scene, and it's ticking up, and the vocals mics have suddenly cut out, you know, and you know, you sort of learn ways around it, you know, to have some things which are, you know, recall safe and that kind of thing. But I could see it as a very, very handy tool, and it is nerve-wracking the first times you actually go down the scene route. But yeah, for certain bands, I would still use that.
Okay, cool, great. One last question, again, maybe a personal one, and you touched on the way you use the space echo and stuff like that. Do you have any special tips or tricks that you'd like to share with the people that are watching our webinar today?
I should know off the top of my head. That's always a very, very difficult thing, because it kind of changes from changes quite a lot. Yeah, I mean, you know, my favorite trick, which I did say earlier on at the moment, was, you know, using the tube staging for the guitars. I think is my favorite thing at the moment. You know, creating a stereo image using two different kinds of amplifiers. So I'm using their flavors and then using the flavors of the tube staging is my favorite trick, I think, at the moment.
Okay, cool. Well, that's great. Well, in that case, I will thank you very much for sharing some of your insights, some of your experience. We hope very much that we'll be able to meet again behind a console as soon as we possibly can.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And we are back. So again, I just want to extend my thanks out to David McDonald for joining us and for sharing some of his insight. And I hope that was insightful for you. So again, please don't hesitate to type your questions in if there's anything you'd like to know about the things we discussed or anything dLive, and we're going to answer some of those over the next sort of 25, 30 minutes for you. One thing I wanted to ask, because I've got Jack at hand, Dave talks about the way he uses widgets and custom rotaries to be able to do multiple things at the same time. So maybe, Jack, you can talk us through how that works, what's available, and maybe a couple of different things that you can use on widgets and soft rotaries to get to something that's a kind of fairly close to an analog workflow in those terms.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen. Hopefully you should be able to see Director now. And yeah, so there are two different things that we're talking about here. We're going to talk about widgets, and we're going to talk about custom rotaries. So I'm going to talk about widgets first. So widgets live in this area, which is sometimes referred to the East widget area. And at the moment, I've got it blank. So there's nothing in there at the moment. So I'm going to press Setup over here. And I'm going to get into the setup page for my soft rotaries. Now, there are a number of different options. The way I like to work is I like to have a gate, I like to have a compressor, and I like to have some sends. Now, there are a number of different ways you can set these up. You can set these up to either follow the channel that's selected or have them bound to a specific channel. So with my gate and comp, if I have a look in the options here, I've currently got these both set to follow cell, but you can lock them to a specific channel if you want. This is sometimes useful if you maybe have a vocalist whose compressor you want to fiddle with all the time or have really quick access to. I know sometimes if I'm really struggling to get drum gates locked in, I'll go ahead and have the gate for the snare on one of these. So I just know it's always there. So if suddenly I realize that he swapped to brushes halfway through a song or something, I can go ahead and really quickly adjust the gate level, something like that. And then the final one I've got set up in this example is send levels. So if I go ahead and press options on send levels, I can choose what I'm sending to. Again, you can either follow your select, you can follow your mix, you can lock it to a specific channel, send it to a specific place. I normally have these set up as effect sends so that I can dial in different reverb sends, different delay sends, that sort of thing. So how would we do that? Well, we go into our channel type. We'd select our effect send. I'm going to go ahead and choose all of these to be effect sends in this example. And then you just go ahead and pop your bus in. There we go. So now when I hit apply, what I now have is 3 pages. On Director, you can change the page by sort of grabbing it and swiping. On a surface, you can do exactly the same, or there are 3 little buttons, so you can quickly jump to pages 1, 2, or 3, depending on which page that you want. Again, on a physical surface, you have on everything except the C1500, you have some physical encoders, so you can go ahead and grab them. As you can see, that is now making changes to the gate. What's useful is that if you're, in bank view, or maybe you're, fiddling with your Dyne 8 and you're, down making settings in some page that's miles away, you can still go ahead and have control of your compressor. You can still go ahead and have control of your compressor, and you can see the compressors changing there whilst in another page entirely, which is really useful. So if we go ahead and look at our last one, we've got our send levels. So these are my effect send levels. So if I was to find my effects bus, so there's effects send 1, and I'm going to select channel 1. You'll see as I move my effects send here, you'll see that the channel send is changing. Again, this is really useful if you're, in a load of layers, you're nowhere near your effects sends, or you don't want to have, sends on faders. Maybe it's really important that you have your hand on the controls for your main sends, and you don't want to be going around fiddling with your effects sends, then you can do it here. There are some other options that you can have. You can have actual controls of effects engines. So if we have a look here, we can select a specific effects engine. So in this case, we've got effects 1, which is a Hall 480. You can press apply. And again, now you can make changes to your effects engines really quickly without being anywhere near them. If I bring up that particular effects engine, which you can see here, as I'm making changes to these encoders here, see the decay time changing. That's changing actual parameters in that effects engine. With again, no need to be anywhere near that effects page. You can be, fiddling with your, you can be fiddling with the EQ on your main vocal, and at the same time playing around with the HF cut in the reverb and deciding, where you want to, how you want to balance that. The other thing we talked about was channel coders. So if I go into my surface preferences, I can change my custom rotary functions. Now these refer to these encoders here, which would be the encoder immediately below the LCD, the channel LCD or the scribble strip. You can have a number of functions. So you have the standard built-in functions, which you can see on Director by right-clicking. So my standard built-in functions are gain, pan, and sends. And I often use these either for effect sends or occasionally sends to auxes, things like that. But you can have a number of different controls here, but definitely my most used one is send level. So you can have your sends to maybe a bus effect, or you can have your sends to a vocal reverb, or sends to whatever you like, which you do by hitting send level, and then you just set your sends, maybe mono effect send 1. So I believe Dave was talking about the fact you could be working on 2 different effect sends at the same time. So you can have an effect send on your custom rotary at the bottom and an effect send on your encoder at the top. What's useful about this is you could maybe have a more generic effect send setup on your custom rotaries. So say this was my main vocal reverb, I could flick these to vocal reverb and be changing my vocal reverb here, while simultaneously in my soft rotary here, changing, you could have specific sends. So if you had, again, maybe your lead vocalist, you wanted to, say your lead vocalist was on channel 30, and you wanted to have specific control of his or her send to a reverb, and you didn't want that to be affected by what was selected, what was which mix you're in, no matter what you have selected or which mix you're in, you would always have control of that specific channel send to that specific reverb. So hopefully that's given you a good crash course in custom rotaries and indeed widgets. One of the things that I know David was talking about was the different preamp options and different preamp emulation options that we have available on dLive. And I think Val, you were going to talk a little bit about what options are available.
I certainly am. Yeah, we're going to talk about those 2 pre's very briefly. And again, please don't hesitate to pop any questions about what we're talking about or anything else for that matter. Just to talk back on those soft rotaries and those custom widgets. When digital platforms first started coming out, for me, there was always a test when I'd walk up to a digital console, whether it's on a trade show or at a rental company, and I'd always say, look, I'm mixing a dub band and I want to send a reverb on the snare and a delay on the vocal at the same time. How can I do that? And that's not possible on a lot of flat platforms. And I really like being able to, have multiple sends at the same time without being on the faders. So still mixing the levels, still using custom rotaries for sends and also the widgets. And also having a widget rotary, which is assigned, for example, to my lead vocal monitor send. So as you mentioned, wherever I am, whatever page is in, if they wave at me for more vocals, I can go and grab that, and it's there all the time without having to select their channel or select a mix. It's just that rotary, and I really love that. So yeah, one of my favorite features. So hopefully you should now have my director as well.
Your Teams chat's open.
Oh, sorry, that's wrong. Whoops. Let's start again. Oh, there we go.
The joys of new webinar platforms.
Yeah, we're working it out. So David mentioned one of his favorite features is the tube pre-emulation. So the tube pre is available on every single input channel. So you can have 128 of these emulations at the same time. They don't incur any latency. You don't have like a resource bar of, oh, you've used 80% or 90%, or you don't have any more. Every single input can have them on them. And what's nice about the tube pre is you don't have to have it. If you want a pure signal, perfectly clean, with no drive, no distortion, you don't use it. You've got a really nice clean signal. But if you want a bit of warmth, you want to add some of that analog sort of harmonic sound, you can put that on every channel you want. So to do that is really straightforward. So I'll select any channel, so input 1, for example, and then I will select the preamp page. And on my preamp, obviously, I've got my gain, I've got my input source, polarity, etc. And in this section here is where I can load my preamp model. So by clicking on this square, I can load either the dual stage valve or the tube stage. Now, the tube stage, I'll show you very briefly, is a fairly straightforward tube emulation model with some quick presets of combinations of 2 different tubes, or just a single tube with a single rotary that changes depending on the preset that I'm using. So it's fairly straightforward. But it is modeled off exactly the same analog preamp as the dual stage valve. So it's exactly the same modelization. It's just a bit more of a plug and play model that's easy to deploy. Switch it on, you've got presets there for you. With the dual stage valve, you have the option of really going into fine detail of the settings you want of each stage of your preamp. So it's in the name. Dual stage means you have 2 stages. So stage 1 can be a triode or a pentode, and we'll talk about that in a sec. And stage 2 can either be off, so you've only got a single stage, or it can also be a triode or a pentode. So with these 2 together, you can have a combination of 2 triodes, 2 pentodes, a triode, then a pentode, or a pentode, and then a triode. So you can really combine these to achieve different results based on what you want to do. Now, just to describe triodes and pentodes very briefly, triodes generate even harmonics. So sort of mild saturation. Of course, you can drive it quite hard if you want to, but essentially with even harmonics, we're talking about low mid, sort of warmth in the low mid area, you know, kind of beefing stuff up to make them sound a bit deeper. Something that I really like to use on things like digital piano. So if I've got maybe a digital Nord lead on stage with a Rhodes sound or something, just a little bit of this in triode gives it just a bit of grit, a bit of warmth that warms thing up, but also really nice on horn section or as David mentioned, on guitars. So that's one way to go. Pentodes, however, have odd harmonics, so slightly different sound signature to them. And when you start to drive that, it's going to start to add a bit more of the high mid harmonic. So more something we'd associate to crunch or a more obvious distortion. And what also happens with pentodes when you start to drive them hard is because of the saturation, we start to see a little bit more compression happening on that signal. So you get some natural compression like you do when you're driving a genuine tube preamp, basically. So you've got triodes, you've got pentodes, and as I mentioned, you can use one or the other, or 2 triodes or 2 pentodes, and you can really drive this hard if you want to. So if you want to drive a guitar that maybe's got a DI input and it's a bit dry, you can hit this pretty hard as well. The final thing that I wanted to mention on this is the little rotary at the bottom, which is HF lift. So what happens when you drive a tube typically is, because you're driving it hard and it's generating low mid or it's generating high mid, is the high frequency tends to drop off a little bit, or because of the distortion, you're losing some of that high end. So the HF lift is there to compensate and to bring up some of that brightness again, to balance the sound basically, and to give you some of that high frequency back again. So really nice tool. As David mentioned, he likes to use it on the same guitar signal that he pans left and right, and he'll have a triode on one and a pentode on the other, and that's giving him the two different sorts of harmonics, and widening up the spectrum of that guitar. Lots of different applications where the dual stage valve is usable, but that's a really nice example for how to use the dual stage valve. So again, 128 of them, you can use them on every input if you want to, although it might get a little bit muddy and intense if you're using it on 120 inputs, but why not, hey? Yeah, so that's the dual stage valve. Then another thing that Dave mentions, and I wanted to talk about briefly, is the effects engine. So he talks about effects a lot. He uses a lot of reverb, a lot of delay and stuff like that. And I just wanted to talk you through the effects really briefly, a couple of examples of what's there. So dLive has 16 effects engines. So you can have 16 different effects, and there's a really, really wide panel of effects that you can choose from. So if I select my FX1 and go into my library, you can see there's a whole range of different effects available for you. So one of his favorites is the, where is it? Yep, is the echo, which is a model again of something that you're probably quite familiar with. So you can drive it with an input gain, you can emulate its original noise or not, and you've got all the same controls that you have on the standard hardware unit. And then you've got different modes, so it has different types of feedback modes, and if you want to know what those different modes are, you can switch on the back panel, and it shows you the different tape echo head modes that the different modes have. So something that's good to have as a reference. And then the other thing he talks about is reverb. So in dLive, there's basically two reverb engines. So there's the standard reverb engine, and then there's the gated verb. And in the standard reverb engine, I'll just recall that, this is what we call the SMR, the Spatial Modeling Reverberator. It's basically an engine, and in that engine, you can load a whole bunch of different presets, whether it's halls, whether it's plates. So if you go into the library, you have a huge range of plate emulations, of hall emulations, room emulations, and a lot of the usual suspects of well-known reverb engines are in there as well, and you can use any of those.
Do you mind if I jump in just for a second?
Jump
if you
in,
also
Jake.
go in and have a look in the library of the SMR, there's a couple of engineers that use dLive a lot that we work with all the time. So I think you'll see Gloker's Gold and Hall Barfoot.
And Hall Barfoot.
Perfect. So those are two engineers who use dLive all the time, who've sort of given us, oh, these are my favorite settings. And we've gone, do you mind if we share them? They've gone, no, by all means. So we've popped those in the library for you. So I think Hall Barfoot's more of an orchestral. It's for making orchestra sound a little bit less dry if you're in a very, very dry room. Gloker's Gold is more of a vocal reverb. I use it all the time on BVs because you basically don't need to do anything. Because I'm very lazy. Sorry, I just wanted to add that way before we went too far.
Absolutely. And to be fair, with so many presets, often I'll agree with you that I'll load a preset and I'm there, and I don't need to mess around with it. So I find that quite often, rather than playing around with all the settings, just loading a different preset gets me to where I want to go. But there's lots of really nice stuff in there to play with. And also the gated verb as well, which is, I was for a very long time not a fan of gated verbs, but with the trends of 80s music coming back quite strongly, This is an absolute joy. It really is such a pleasure to work with it. It sounds amazing, especially if you're working with any sort of cover bands or, you know, any Queen song. Go for the gated Verb. It's absolutely awesome. So yeah, so I wanted to talk through those really briefly, and show that there really are loads and loads of options for those reverbs. So we're going to hand over to you and have a look at some of the questions that are coming in. We might be doing a really good job because I haven't had a lot of questions, but please don't hesitate to pop any questions in if there's anything. So Jack, here's a question for you. What will Loic asks, what will the future of dLive be, both software, firmware updates or hardware? Tell us everything that we're going to develop in the next couple of years.
Well, obviously, if I said everything, I'd lose my job. Like we've got to keep some secrets. As anyone who's followed us closely will know, and we've been working really hard to try and get 1.9 out through the global downturn in which we find ourselves. I have seen some of the recent 1.9 betas. It's coming along really well. I'm not entirely sure when it's going to be out at the moment, but it is very much in the later stages of development. But it's got a number of features that people have been asking for. We're working on getting some new deep compressors in there. So we're hoping to have a bus compressor. What was the other thing I was allowed to say? And we're going to increase support for wireless microphone manufacturers. So we're really hoping to have support for not just Shure, but also Sennheiser in our wireless microphone support. So there are some really good things coming. There's some other stuff which, you're just going to have to wait. We're going to have some cards, but there's definitely sort of plenty of development going on in that front. dLive is also likely to get a longer development cycle than other products we've had in the past. So there will be more firmware releases coming after 1.9, which isn't something we've sort of done before, as far as I'm aware. So we're already thinking about what's going to come next, which will obviously be probably sort of 12 months or so down the line. Don't hold me to that. I'm probably getting a million R&D engineers just cried out in pain when I said that, but so that there will be more firmware coming, there will be more features. A lot of what we're doing at this point is adding more complex features, but also trying to get sort of feature requests and things that customers have asked for in the firmware. dLive is now really quite a mature platform. It's a mature platform where for most of the things one would want to do with the sound desk, dLive will do. So we're no longer in the realms of adding EQs or something. We're in the realms of adding complicated features like wireless microphone integration. So that's certainly the development level from a software point of view. There's no sort of immediate plans for any new hardware. Obviously, we've recently come out with the CTI 1500, which is sort of the lightweight version of the 1500 for sort of fly touring and things like that. Not the best timing, I'm sure you can appreciate, but that's sort of dLive's latest hardware revision. It's one of those things where we're always working on new things, but it's about finding the right product at the right time. So it would be a little bit silly for me to suggest that there are other things on the way at the moment. I hope that answers your question.
Thanks very much, Jack. And as you mentioned, dLive and all of our other platforms are under constant development, so it's not fallen by the wayside. We are working on everything all the time. So yeah, there's much to look forward to, thankfully. Okay, so either we've been really, really efficient, or everyone's really, really shy because we've kind of come to the end of any questions. So you've got a last couple of minutes to pop anything in if there's anything you want to know about dLive while we're here. In the meantime, what I will say is that we've got some more webinars coming up. So on Facebook Live every Thursday, we've got Jack and Keith who have some sessions. Keith is on this Thursday talking about QSQ. And then Jack will be alternate Thursdays talking about Avantis and dLive. We've also got some more webinars coming up with myself. So next week on Tuesday, I have the pleasure of sharing an interview with Ian Barfoot, who's again a really well-known engineer who does a lot of orchestra work. And we're going to be talking about the challenges and how to overcome the challenges of mixing an orchestra, both live and to broadcast. We'll also have a little delve into Prime, our Prime preamps, and we'll talk about those a little bit. So some really nice subject matter there. Then on the 7th of December, we've got a focus on custom control. So we're going to go into some depth of custom control, how to design layouts for custom control, how to set them up on different devices, how it works, where custom control exists. So we're really going to go and delve deep into custom control, and it's focused on expanding your mixer. So we've done a lot of talk about custom control for install and integration and that stuff, and I'd like to talk about how you can basically grow the features and the functionalities of your mixer for more live event stuff with custom control. So we'll talk about that on the 7th of December. And then finally, probably the one I'm looking forward to the most, on the 15th of December, I'll be joined by my colleagues, Keith and Jack, and who knows who else. We'll be getting our mulled wine out. We'll be getting our Christmas jumpers on, and we've got a Christmas special for you.
Are we getting drunk on webinar?
Mulled wine, the alcohol's cooked out, right?
I hope so.
But we're going to have an Ask Us Anything session with both Keith and Jack and myself, and maybe a few other people joining on the 15th of December that we'd love to have you joining as well. So with that, I will close it up for today. Thank you very much for joining. I hope it was a smooth experience for everyone. It's not too bad on our side. So thanks again. Thanks, Jack, for joining me today.
No
thanks to David McDonald as well for joining us. And we look forward to speaking to you online and hopefully in person as soon as possible. So have a great day and thanks very much.
Thanks all.